I've done many podcasts on Donald Trump, all very much pejorative. I mean, when we talk about noticing our opinions and what we respond to and what we're repelled by, I've been consistently repelled by Donald Trump. And part of it is that he's able to access, from an integral perspective, he's able to access what we would call red energy or warrior energy. That's somebody who wakes up in the morning fighting. It's not necessarily about winning as much as it is about fighting. And we saw this with him. He lost. He was, as I said in my podcast, finally relegated to the rearview mirror of history. But no, he comes back. The warrior wakes up in the morning ready to fight. He practices fighting. He's thin-skinned. He's always on the make in some way. It's win or lose. It's conspiracies, reactive, in a way, pre-truth. If we look at red, it's actually pre-truth in the sense that rationality hasn't really come online yet. And that's, in a way, the heart of Donald Trump. He's a natural autocrat. He's ruthless in a way that most people aren't. He never lets his guard down. He's interesting and entertaining, a little bit scary. You have to pay attention. You can't ignore him. And I remember I did a podcast a couple of years ago, actually, called Psychopaths Are People Too. And it was a podcast about the recognition of all kinds of people on all kinds of spectrums of empathy and gifts and limitations. And it's one of the things that we've realized as we've evolved into these new structures of consciousness that we're in now, is that there are people who have empathy disorders and they have narcissism disorders. And this would be Trump. And I made a note here, actually, of an interview that he did where the interviewer asked him, "How do you handle stress?" And his response struck me. He said, "I try and tell myself it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. If you tell yourself it doesn't matter, like you do shows, you do this, you do that, and then you have an earthquake in India where 400,000 people get killed. Honestly, it doesn't matter. That's how I handle stress." And so what has happened for me is I'm seeing that there is room in the world for people who are operating not all the time from red, but they're able to access red. And there's a taboo against red as we develop into, we civilize ourselves in the blue traditional structure, where we learn to sit down and shut up and be obedient and follow the rules. Red doesn't follow the rules. Red fights. Red is on the make. But, Trump understands how to do blue. In fact, he's the standard bearer for traditionalists throughout the country. The God and country people love him because he's their retribution. He's the one who is going up against their enemy, which is the modern and postmodern structures of consciousness. So that's what he's doing. And at some point, I noticed, in fact, Steve came over and we were talking, and I was just observing to Steve that I've stopped hating Trump. And this was, I guess, a little bit before the election. I realized that for me, Trump had moved from just the monster, the cockroach, to a sort of a big daddy, which is, in a way, a more positive version. Again, he can do blue. Of course, he can do modern. He was bestride the New York real estate scene. He knows how to do modernity. He also knows how to do postmodernity in a way. But I think Trump makes the mistake that a lot of conservatives do about postmodernity, where they see woke as a mind virus. Elon Musk talks a lot about this. And I think it's a misunderstanding. I think that every stage comes online on the backs of the fanatics of that stage. So the fanatics of green, of the multicultural, sensitive, rehabilitate the people who have been left behind and marginalized. That could be done in a fanatic way, but there's also something that's coming online that is a permanent acquisition of humanity. And the idea that we would, if you look at history and look at the developmental stages, we talk about, tribal is us and them, okay? Then we have red is predator and prey, people who are on the make and people who are kissing up the big daddy. We have in traditionalism saints and sinners, people who follow the laws of God and are good citizens, and people who don't. In modernity, we have winners and losers. So when we get to postmodernity and we have an arising consciousness that seeks to rehabilitate the prey, the other, the sinners, the losers, that is an achievement of humanity. And the differentiation between the fanatics, there's fanatic modernists too. I might say that Sam Harris is a fanatic modernist. Sam Harris does not believe in free will. He sees consciousness as being substrate independent. That is, if you get a complex enough machine, it'll be conscious. And I don't know, maybe that's true, but that's a disenchanting view of humanity that is a fanatic modernist. And, most of us, or some of us, have that in us, so we don't necessarily see just how radical that idea is. So we move from a world where, as Ken Wilber says, where God is everywhere, and that's pre-modern, to a world where God is nowhere and completely banished from the public sphere in about 100 years. So we have this Big Daddy Trump who has the worst of this red that he's able to access. Most people in modern culture, red is marginalized. It's put in the shadows. We do it surreptitiously. We're not as, somebody once said that Donald Trump is the most authentic con man he's ever met. And I think that's true. And there's something that's charming about that. And, can we believe that this guy has come back at age 78? And that assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, where he comes up with a bloodied face shouting, "Fight, fight, fight." Not win, win, win. Fight, fight, fight. That's the difference between, winners and losers and just fighting for the sake of fighting. And so that's what we have.